Hello all, welcome to this new Energy Scan webinar session. We are going to wait 1 minute to let more people coming in. So welcome to those who just joined. It's now time to launch the third thematic webinar session of 2025. I'm Julien Waro. I'm in charge of the economic research team here at ENGIE Global Energy Management and Sales. So on top of our usual webinar sessions dedicated to the energy market outlook, we decided to organize several thematic sessions in 2025 to focus on specific topics. So after the EU ETS2 in February and the global geopolitical context in April, today we'll focus on the recent trends of what we used to call green certificates or EAC for environmental attribute certificates for both European power and biomethane. So in this session, I'm delighted to be joined by two members of our environmental market access team in Paris, Quentin Massonneau and Fabien Lefebvre, who are both environmental traders and carry years of experience on European power GOs and biomethane certificate markets. So let me remind you that this is an interactive session. So as usual, check out the buttons on the bottom right corner of your screen to ask questions to our speakers. So if you want the question to be displayed on the screen, you need to ask your question in the questions module, so the icon questions. You can also chat with participants and leave a suggestion to the team in the chat module. We'll do a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and I remind you that the session will last 1 hour. Finally, you will also be asked to fill a one question satisfaction survey at the end of the session. You can already download the slides of the presentation. The replay of the session will also be available by tomorrow at the latest on our EnergyScan platform. And if you want to download the slides, you just have to click on the apps on the bottom right corner, then handouts, and then you should see the PDF file, and you can download the slides directly. So let's move on to the first part of this presentation with Quentin. And as usual, we will start with one question poll to launch the topic. So let me launch the poll. So only 4 AIB countries impose annual matching for guarantees of origin. So France, Germany, Australia, and Czech Republic. Other countries allow previous year production to compensate current year consumption, which contributes to market oversupply and some way discredit the system in public opinion. Should annual matching be mandatory in all AIB countries? What do you think? Yes, no, or you don't have an opinion on this? So I will just wait a few seconds to give you some time to answer. It's quite split. We see 40% of yes and 1/3 of no, and yeah, 1/4 of the audience with no specific opinion on this. So Quentin, I think that's a key topic for you in this presentation.
Yes, yes, indeed. Hello everyone. Quite interesting to see the response. We're getting closer to 50% now. Uh, so indeed, I mean, today it's one of the hot topics of the market for the power guarantees of origin. Uh, and I will describe it a bit later. It definitely contributes to the market length, basically, which we think is a big tendency now that we should, I believe we should be going towards a mandatory annual matching for all the countries in the AIB region. Um,
Okay,
but yeah, let's.
so it's time to start the presentation. So leave you the floor.
Yes, thank you, Julien. Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. So my name is Quentin Massonneau. I'm one of the traders on the guarantee on the environmental trading desk of ENGIE. And yeah, today I'm going to be speaking a little bit about guarantees of origin. So for starters, let's have a quick reminder of why we use guarantees of origin. A GO, guarantees of origin, is a key instrument that will help us meet the regulatory targets in terms of renewable energy. According to the GHG protocol, EACs are the only recognized product for reducing scope 2. So it means that today, for a company with SBTi targets, the GO is really the product to use. Of course, you have different ways of using the GO. You can use it in a PPA bundled with electricity. The PPA we all know. Using it, or we can use it unbundled from the electricity. So if we use it bundled in a PPA, of course, the product is a bit more complex to set up. It's also a bit more expensive, but of course you can communicate a lot more on it uh, with your company. But let's keep in mind that PPAs today represent only 20% of the market, which means that 80% of the GO sold today in the market are unbundled. So unbundled GOs are really the most common way and the easiest way to use a GO today. Um, so with that in mind, let's look at the fundamentals of this market. Let's start with the AIB power production. AIB, quick reminder, it's really in the end just Europe plus Norway. Norway makes a big difference, of course, because it's 99% renewables. So power production in the AIB region, we had a decrease. We see a decrease in the graph, in the table rather, from 22 to 23. This was mainly due to the Ukraine crisis, and then from 23 to 24, the power production is in the end relatively stable. The trend is probably for an increase, but at the moment it's quite stable. If we look now on the left-hand side, if we focus on the RES production, on the renewable energy production, the trend is really increasing. We see that year after year, the renewable production is increasing quite nicely. And today, in the production mix, renewable account for 51% of the production. And this, for us, this trend is really something that will continue. If we want to meet our Fit for 55 targets set by the European Commission, we still have some ways to go because we need to reach 42.5% of renewable energy in the consumption mix. This is the production mix, so it's a bit different. So we still today probably the consumption mix is around 35%. So we still have a good way to go to meet the target by 2030. Let's look at now if we focus on the renewable part of this production. In last year, 2024, we had 880 terawatt hours of GO produced, of GOs issued, of GOs tagged in the market. From those, we have 54% coming from hydro. So this is, of course, quite massive. More than 50% of the production comes from hydro, mainly from the Nordic countries. And this is already maybe a point of discomfort for some people because yeah, the hydro is mainly coming from old assets, sometimes 50, sometimes 100 years old assets, who are producing the GOs. So essentially, you can argue that the additionality of this is arguable. We have then about 30% of wind issued in the guarantees of origin, and then 10% solar, 86% biomass. And then if you look at the balance per each country, you notice that you have, of course, some countries that are long GO, that are therefore exporting their GOs. Not surprisingly, Norway, which is 99% renewable in terms of production mix, is exporting 92 terawatt hours of their GO. They're producing about 150 terawatt hours, and they're exporting 92 tera. France is also a big exporter, 42 terawatt hour, which is a bit counterintuitive considering we pay a premium for French GOs because France imposes a monthly matching, only country in the region doing this. So we pay a premium for France, but however, we still have at the end of the year too many GOs, so we export them to other countries. Big importers, of course, the biggest of all is Germany. 165 terawatt hour imported. I think the total constellation last year was about 200 or 210. So it means that indeed for a consumer in Germany, you have very few possibility to buy the national guarantees of origin, which come at a fair premium, and most people indeed need to import the GOs from other countries, and then mainly Norway. And the reason for that, as you might know, is because Germany is blocking the issuance of GOs from subsidized assets. So an asset that is receives a subsidy from the state cannot issue a guarantee of origin. Now, if we look at the global balance of the market in the bottom chart, the bottom line, this is the cumulative market length. So we take basically the issuance minus cancellation, and we allow for a rolling of the old GOs onto the current position, excluding, of course, the GOs that are expiring. This balance is in terawatt hour. The market early this year was long about 500 terawatt hour before the period of cancellation. So now we're back down around 350. But the length of the market is massive, basically. And one major reason for this is because annual matching is only imposed in only 4 countries, as we mentioned in the chat, in France, in Germany, in Austria, and in Czech Republic. Or in all other countries, you can basically use the GO produced the previous year for your current year production, for your current year consumption. So in the end, there's if we're really serious about this market, I believe that this needs to change, because the credibility of this market is at stake in the end, and being able to have this type of usage of the GO is not really constructive, I think, for this market. So because technically, what you can do is buy a GO produced in Iceland or in Norway, coming from old assets, old hydro reservoir, and use and those produced in 2024, and you can use them in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy, so south of Europe, which the grid connection is probably arguable as well, and you can use it for your 2025 consumption. So I believe that this might need to change, and currently at the moment we see quite a bit of lobbying in the market, and quite a few people pushing so that annual matching becomes the new rule for all the countries in Europe. This will not happen overnight, but we believe it is going to be the new trend. If we look just a map to have a visual representation of the balance per country, on the left-hand side, we have the balance in 2025. This is our own ENGIE projections out to 2030. currently, as we saw, the Nordic countries are generally very long GOs in the balance. France is long, Spain, Portugal as well, and all the Eastern Europe is short. And when we basically, with the current rules, so without any change in rules, if we extrapolate out until 2030, the balance basically in every country kind of reduces. France tipped into the red zone, and Spain is actually really flat in our projection. So in the end, the message is that by 2030, all the countries will be a bit, the balance will basically reduce, because we expect electrification to be going up basically. Another slide that is interesting to look at when we focus a little bit, we have a shorter term indicator for the balance of the market. The blue bars here in this chart is the short term balance for the geo market. So we take issuance minus cancellation on a monthly basis, and we average it out over a year. And then we have these blue bars, and in green we have the geo prices. So we see here that during 2023, let's say end of 22 and 23, the balance became quite under tension, and that mainly was due to a low hydrological level during this period. The hydro reservoir were really low, and the market got really scared that the supply was not going to be enough in the market, and prices went up significantly. And we see that with this short-term indicator, when in 2024, we probably all remember we had a pretty wet year all across Europe. The hydro reservoir were back at full capacity, not at full capacity, but at high level, above average, and the balance became much bigger, and oversupply came back in, and this is the main reason why geo prices went significantly down from their peak level that we saw during the 2023 period. And at the same time, indeed, we have a stable demand on the power and rest production that is increasing, so contributing to the length of the market. Another graph that is interesting to look at in this market is we always want to find, in a way, a correlation between pure power prices and geo prices. So here we have the German power Cal+1 on the left-hand side of the chart, and geo prices for Cal+1 on the right-hand side of the chart. And here we clearly see that during the big spike in the power prices that we saw during Ukraine crisis in 22, we had a move up and down, extremely violent. And during that same period, geos actually were increasing relatively steadily, due, as we saw, to the tension on hydro. And then gradually, power came back to normal, and geo prices came back down as well. But the correlation here is not probably very clear, not evident. What is interesting to look at, however, I think, is the price of geo as a percentage of the price of power. During the period 23, we have a price of geo that's basically around 6 and 8 euros. At the same time, power is around 150, let's say. So the geo as a percentage of the price of power is around 5%. Now, for the most of the past year, basically, power is basically hovering around 100 euro mark, and geos are basically around 1 euro. So we have a geo that is worth 1% of the price of power. It means that basically today, for a consumer, you can basically buy green energy for just 1% more of the price you already pay for power. We think it's not, it feels actually not excessive, and at least it's a lot cheaper than it was 2 years ago. Now let's focus on purely on prices, and let's talk maybe about the outlook. This on the left hand side is the price of geos. As we saw, basically from 23 down to today, we saw like a one-way street market down with a consolidation phase, sorry, around mid of last year, around the 250 euro mark. Now the market is relatively stable, although we had a period of quite high volatility last week. But let's say now today you can buy a 25 to 2030 strip. You can buy this strip between 120 and 150 euro. So let's say you buy this strip. What is the downside really today? Well, the downside is that the market tanks. The market goes down to zero because oversupply keeps going. It stays like this, and we never have anything that changes. Maybe Germany even comes in and says, okay, now we can issue GOs from our subsidized assets. So really prices come down to zero. Okay, fine, you lost €50. That is your downside because GO cannot go into negative territories. What is now the upside? On the upside, the first risk that we see is that, I mean, we can easily have in the next few years a period of hydro tension, a very dry year coming around, and this can happen in the end relatively quickly. In a matter of a few months, we can realize there's a tension on hydro, and prices could spike back up really quickly. Even if, say, we don't go back to the 10 euro or 8-10 euros we saw a couple of years ago, because prices of power was high. So in the end, you can argue that that consumers were ready to pay a bit more for their GOs. But still, with a hydro tension, with a dry period, I think we could clearly, relatively easily see prices go back up to 4 or 5 euros. So it's already quite bigger than 150. A second risk is that on the medium term, as we said, the tension on the market pushing towards annual matching for everyone could be implementing. If basically annual matching becomes the new norm and is imposed across all the countries of AIB, the market length that we saw will significantly decrease. Not drastically all of a sudden, but gradually. If annual matching is implemented, the balance will come back down, and prices should clearly increase. It's again a move towards 3-5 euros doesn't seem really far away anyways. Some other arguments you could have for a move higher are a bit more on the longer term and probably more regulatory more than anything. But we see today, at least already, a tendency for people to focus more, at least on the longer term of the curve, to focus on wind solar sourcing and young assets. If all the players, if it's be it a regulatory rule or something more voluntary, to exclude all the hydro assets from the system, we could have a massive shock in the market. We could also see maybe two markets saying you have the price for GOs coming from wind solar, young assets, continental countries of Europe trading at a very high premium, and Norway and Ireland hydro trading at a significant discount. So this is typically something that could happen. We could also see, for example, a willingness for consumer to only buy GOs locally, privilege the GOs coming from your own country, but maybe at least buy something from neighboring countries, for example. So all these aspects, we think, are in favor for a forward market, a market going forward that is higher than current levels, around 150. So in the end, the risk-reward ratio today for buying, let's say, a 25-30 strip around 1 to 150 euro, we clearly think the upside is much better than the downside. I will close this discussion, this presentation with the products we can offer. I mean, what can we offer here at ENGIE? Huh? On the desk we have EGMA. You might be familiar with the platform. We can propose. We can sell anything from the very generic GOs, AIB and ERES, to the country specific, the tech specific. We can do flex, basically full of tech as consumed volumes as well. We can do the labels, RE100 with a COD less than 15 years. We can do the long-term strips. We can easily quote and trade a 10-year strip if needed. So many things on the table we can do. Maybe just one last quick word. I mean, in the world of EACs, energy attribute certificates, we have the GO, but we also have IREX. So today, if you have a need to reduce your scope 2 with somewhere else in the world, we can help you and provide IREX, which is the equivalent of a GO, but anywhere else in the world, basically, except for US, and which has their own system. We can do something in Brazil, in Morocco, in Egypt, in South Africa. ENGIE has assets there, so we're quite competitive, etc. So feel free to reach out as well on these topics. Thank you very much. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Quentin. It's time to take some questions. First question regarding the matching rule. Do you have an idea of the current GO total stock that would be outdated or wiped out of the market with the 1-year constraint or the yearly matching in all countries?
It's a good question, actually. We would need to probably do the calculation, but it would probably be somewhere around 50 to 100 terawatt-hour, I would think. So it would in one shot reduce relatively significantly the balance, I would say. It's something we can, but the current balance is something we show on Energy Scan already. Most of the things I presented as well is able to see on Energy Scan, but the balance is something you can see there, and clearly it's probably something we could share as well going forward. That's a good point.
Second question regarding Norwegian GOs and double counting issues. What is your view on the potential resolution of this issue? Do you see any risk in buying Norwegian GOs?
Well, so far, indeed, Norwegian GOs is, as we saw, is a huge part of the market, and today people are still using it and buying it. I mean, at the moment, AIB has not at all any complaint against the practice going on in Norway. For some period, there were discussions politically in Norway saying there could be the possibility to simply exit the AIB system. But recently, it has been, at the moment, probably kicked out of the table. This option for us is not as likely as it was maybe 2 years ago. So we are not. We still think it's a risk. It's definitely important to mention that as well. I should have mentioned that in the risk. Pure Norway exit of the system, we think, is relatively is probably low risk, but still. I'm at least on our side, we are not extremely comfortable to buy specifically Norwegian hydro volumes on the long part of the curve, because there's always that risk which you want to be hedged against, and that is why we clearly see in the market today a big tendency, a big trend for people willing either to buy EU specific. So when you say you want to buy a GO from EU, it's not AIB, it's European Union, and Norway is not part of the European Union technically. So you don't buy, you basically exclude Norway when you buy EU, or you buy wind solar. there is extremely low volumes of wind solar in the Nordics. So the best chance you have is to receive something from the continent. So it's clearly a trend, and that's why in our view, we think, going forward, a premium for wind solar assets, young assets, and a discount for Norwegian or Nordic hydro volumes is quite likely.
All right. Just one question as well regarding Go demand and the perspective and the forecast. So what could drive Go demand higher in the coming years, more specifically?
Well, indeed, I mean, at the moment, as I said, the actual power consumption, power demand is relatively stable. But indeed, we talk. There's many talks about generally electrification, right? If electrification really starts happening more strongly, if we have data centers in the region consuming a lot more, we already see some demand in there, but this trend could clearly ramp up massively. There's also, of course, talks about green H2, etc. So all these factors could clearly push the demand for power and for green power. The
All
outlook,
right.
in our view, is quite good.
One last question in the chat. Are there any discussion to merge IREX GOs and the US Go system?
Not that I know of. It's interesting. Indeed, it would be quite useful to have one single product to hedge everything. Unfortunately, today it's not as simple indeed, and I completely understand and realize it can be complicated for some players which have a worldwide consumption. Because it's the case of many companies, and you have to engage into local hedging for all your European countries, and then have with European GOs, and then have US REX in the US, which has a separate registry, etc. You have IREX. The IREX system is actually a lot more simple to use because you have one central registry, and you can redeem from this central registry onto any other countries in the world. So on this registry, you can receive IREX produced in each and every single countries, but you can redeem on the same registry, which is a lot easier than what we have in Europe, where you need to redeem it locally in each and every local country. So I would love to have a certificate that's central and that we could use in every part of the world, but it's probably not for now. At least I haven't heard any discussions like that.
Okay, thank you, Quentin, for your presentation,
Thank you very much.
for your answers. It's now time to switch to the biomethane market with Fabien. Hello, Fabien.
Hello, Julien. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Julien, for having me. And congrats, Quentin, for his very thorough presentation. I hope it won't put mine to shame too much. And please excuse my voice. It betrayed me a bit, but it should be fine for his presentation.
Okay, Fabien. So we will have two questions, two polls for our audience for this biomethane presentation. So I will launch the first one, and then we'll take the second one right after this, and we'll give you some time to react. So first question, in the Renewable Energy Directive number 3, the carbon intensity benchmark set for conventional natural gas for heating purposes is set at 80 grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule starting in 2026. What carbon intensity can be claimed when using biomethane? So several answers are possible. So is that 30 grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule, 15, 0, minus 60, or minus 100? So let's have a first glimpse of the results. It's quite split. So 1/3 of the audience is voting for 0 carbon intensity. but then yeah, we see a mixed bag of results. That's interesting. So thank you for your votes. I will launch the second poll because the two polls are related. Second question: biomethane may be a solution for the following purpose, and several answers are possible again in this question. So is it a solution for voluntary disclosure of greenhouse gas reduction efforts? Is it a solution for ETS1 compliance, ETS2 compliance, for maritime fuel EU compliance, local biofuel blending obligations for transport heating, or just a successful life, generally speaking? So let's have a glimpse on the votes. So we see again splitted answers with blending obligations and voluntary disclosures of GHG reduction efforts first. So Fabien, what were the right answers for these two questions?
Well, it was a bit of a trick because actually all the answers are correct. You can maybe put aside successful living in general, although I did click on it, but that's a more personal statement. But joke aside, of course, there are two main takeaways which we can grab from this little quiz. The first one, and it's quite important, it's that biomethane, which is how we call biogas once it is transformed, purified, and injected into the gas grid, well, ends up being comparable, if not alike, to natural gas, fossil natural gas, at least in terms of physical properties. But when we consider biomethane, we must consider the global approach, and that is how it derives from very wide variety of feedstock. And once we take into account that global footprint of a methanation scheme, well, then we realize that there are very different situations and therefore very different products. Whether you use crops that could be qualified as food, well, then it's not a very virtuous situation, and the carbon intensity of your global scheme won't be that great compared to conventional natural gas. And however, if you use material such as animal waste, which would on the open air have very strong methane emissions, well, you actually not only build some gas with those animal waste, but you also avoid fatal methane emissions, and that's how you achieve certification-wise, at least, that's how you achieve negative carbon intensity, which can be a very strong leverage when you must come into your compliance schemes, such as blending obligations or total intensity of your fuel mix, typically in Fuel EU Maritime or that kind of regulation. Which brings us to the second very important takeaway of this small quiz, is that biomethane is a key component of several EU regulations, as you've seen. The ETS 1 and 2, although for the ETS 2, all local application rules are not completely declined, but the logic is you will be able to avoid ETS 2 payments if your natural gas is biosourced, well, your gas is biomethane. And obviously, so you can use biomethane in several EU regulations, so whether they concern direct emissions, so the ETS, or biofuel blending obligations. And so the possibilities and, of course, the limitations in this use within compliance scheme is a very key driver of demand, and it can trigger very strong price variations as the scheme and regulations may evolve. So that will bring us to a first slide, which is sort of the maybe not a global balance because it's a bit more difficult to have a live figures when it comes to biomethane because it's not a purely say European grid with monitoring or electronic monitoring. So it's usually historical figures, but we try to use the last we have, obviously. But before we get into those figures, if you allow me, just a little bit of history, because all what we show here derives from the Repower EU scheme. So as you know, European Union suffered a very dramatic increase in energy prices in the midst of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. And that's where it initiated Repower EU, which is a multi-axis plan built to emphasize the efforts, which for most of them were already existing, but to muscle them a bit in order to reduce fossil fuel dependence. And among the many measures put in place in Repower EU, there was a strong leveling up of the biomethane production targets, all the way up to 35 BCM by 2030. So whenever we have new regulations, be it for the RED, the Fuel EU pouring into local and national legislations in turn, it's always with that 35 BCM target in mind. So that's why it's so important. And when we look at the historical growth, because it is rapidly growing, but as we can see, not rapidly enough. If we look at this historical growth of biomethane production, well, at least in the 6 countries that make up 95% of it, so we'll focus the study on them. If we project this existing rate onto 2030, we see we're pretty short, up to 150 terawatt hours short. So obviously there's a gap. So the forthcoming regulation will more and more attempt to fill in this gap. And just it's because it's important to mention it because you always have debates whether a regulation is completely out of line, it's out of touch with the physical realities. There was a very interesting EBA study. So EBA is a professional association. It's the European Biomethane Association, which publishes a lot of data, and quite useful one. The EU 27 potential in terms of feedstock, everything available to build up biomethane, goes all the way to 40 BCM. So Repower EU is clearly an ambitious target, but it's not an outrageous one. But what we can see is we still have a lot of work to do and a lot of additional muscling up in terms of regulation and purchase behavior if we want to meet these targets, which is key for the EU, energy and independence, because obviously when you use local feedstock, you untie yourself from Russian gas, of course, but also many kinds of LNG imports. So on to slide 2, and we may want to spend a bit of time on that. And I apologize for the pretty light color here. I thought I changed it, but I'll go through it by voice anyhow. So simple slide, but however, lots of information. So you don't hesitate to get back to it in the questions afterward. If anything wasn't clear, I'll try to be as thorough as I can. So on your left side, what you can see is you have 2 demand drivers, which are voluntary and compliance. So we've seen that biomethane is a pivot tool for many schemes. So that's quite a given that there will be a compliance demand, although it's not completely straightforward, and we cannot know what it will be in the next years because obviously legislations evolve. But it's already here, and we'll discuss that later on. But there's also voluntary demand. If you enter a protocol such as the CDP, well, then you may want to declare that the biggest part possible of your natural gas purchases are actually or some of them are biosourced. So that's for the 2 chunks of demand. And when you want to go into the biomethane world, well, then what can you buy? And that's where it gets a bit more complicated. And say among the big fractures of biomethane product characterization, you have the subsidized and the unsubsidized. When we say subsidized, we mean that it's biomethane injected into the grid on a fixed tariff or premium, meaning that the state in which the biomethane is injected provides a fixed tariff to make sure that the plants operating biomethane can be profitable. So it's a financing scheme where public money is poured into the biomethane upstream to make sure that there's a biomethane production. So there's no market volatility. It's costly, but it allows for the production to ramp up. So whenever you buy a physical biomethane or a certificate involving biomethane, it will need to state if it was subsidized or unsubsidized. Unsubsidized is the fraction of biomethane plants which will completely face a free market. They have no subsidy, and they need to find buyers which will be keen to pay the full cost of unsubsidized biomethane, which is very expensive. Which is very expensive. So it's for now not the majority of what is traded, because you need to unsubsidize biomethane for some specific schemes, such as biofuel incorporation for transport. We'll get to that later. Or if you want to be very proactive as a big corporation with big means, and you want to enter strategic partnership and show that you help out on biomethane upstream creation. So that's for the two categories. And then something which is paramount when we discuss biomethane trading is whether you are uncertified or certified. Uncertified just means that your biomethane, your biogas initially was eligible to be poured into the grid, but it says nothing on the feedstock that were used to build this biomethane. So it can be completely biased on crop, and crop, as we've discussed, is not so much valued in the European schemes because it's in competition with food, and as we've seen with biofuels, it's something which the EU Commission tries to get away from by putting more and more and more value with multiplication schemes or double counting on everything which is related to waste, because obviously it's more virtuous to be based on waste than to be based on food. So that's why whenever you want to use your biomethane in any kind of compliance scheme to avoid paying ETS or to avoid to comply with Fuel EU Maritime to show that your global fuel has less carbon intensity, you will need certified biomethane. And then you go down a rabbit hole because certified biomethane requires additional proof, and which are named proofs of sustainability, a POS, when it comes to trading. And this POS is like a passport. It's a stamp that is additional to the biomethane which you buy, and to the guarantee of origin, because there's also a GO when it comes to biomethane, although it's not as fungible and it's not as easy to shift from a country to another than a power GO. But anything you trade certified will need to have this proof of sustainability, which is like a very complex passport because it states the carbon intensity of all the feedstock you used, including the transports which was necessary to utilize this feedstock and transform it into biomethane. In that way, all the chain from waste or crop to biomethane will be related to this POS, stating and granting you the official possibility to use it in an EU compliance scheme. So I'm staying a bit long on this slide because it's really paramount. And when you trade certified biomethane, not only do you need a POS, but we reason, unlike the PowerGo and in Quentin's world, we reason in mass balance. So it's not a book and claim. You cannot say I have a biomethane GO, so I can just do my claim. You need to prove that at some point there was a gas injection in the grid. So when you manipulate certified biomethane, you will have gas leg, a GO, and a POS. And the last feature of the slide, so when we enter the certified world, we will have a POS, and the POS can be very different from another if it's crop-based or if it's manure-based. And as you can see, obviously, there's a CI versus price ladder, which is not completely straightforward because it's not linear. But obviously, the less your intensity, the higher the price. So in the end, you can see that biomethane is a word, but the biomethane market is actually loads of products, whether it's very simple, uncertified guarantees of origin, or more complex manure-based certified schemes with a POS and a natural gas leg, or physical gas leg, excuse me. So on to slide number 3. That was important to discuss market because here we have a curve, but it doesn't say all the complexity of the biomethane market, because what I mean is that there's no unique price for biomethane certificates. So what we use here is actually a bundle. It's a proxy of a certain category of biomethane certificates, which is subsidized certified production, mainly based on waste and residues. So that's a threshold where we can look into market behaviors, but it doesn't mean that biomethane in Europe is worth 25 euros. It's just one specific chunk of the market. That's also something quite important to understand. And then I'll try to be a bit more rapid so we can switch to questions. So the reality of market, as we've seen, is quite fragmented because it's still unclear whether unsubsidized biomethane is required to comply with regulation. In the example of Fuel EU Maritime, at some point, the operators and the auditors and even the commission were not very clear as whether you needed unsubsidized or subsidized. Recently, it seems to be eligible. Subsidized gas seems to be eligible. So there was a very recent trend where unsubsidized gas dipped and subsidized went up. That's typically the kind of market move which you can have because it's very strongly related to regulation and the interpretation official or semi-official bodies may have of the regulation. So it's really important to follow the rules and the evolutions they may have. Another complexity in the biomethane market is that you have the local aspects. Biomethane was built on a country basis, not AIB. So if you have local specifics in France, not all certified natural or biomethane geos, can be eligible to ETS1 compliance. It's only a percentage of them. Because they believe that since they subsidize production, they can only grant parts of this production to do ETS compliance, which is not the case in other countries. In some countries, you can avoid corporate tax when you inject biomethane. Some you don't. So aside from the physical differentiation of biomethane certificates, you also have local application differences, which means the market is pretty fragmented. Sometimes you can import documents, sometimes you cannot. So this is a very global trend, but it's not at all harmonized priced. On to next slide. So what to say for the future? As any kind of market, especially the rising green commodities, you have strong challenges and also strong drivers. On the challenge side, well, we went through them, and I guess it was complex enough for just one presentation. But we have very fragmented markets and regulation. This regulations tend to be positive in terms of biomethane output because the global target is to dramatically increase production, but they're not stable. And even if the regulation pushes towards more biomethane, well, it's difficult to adapt when you have new text, blending obligations kicking in. It can be postponed by 1 year or not. The GHG protocol is completely unclear when it comes to biomethane, and it shouldn't be completely dealt with by 2027. Products are complex. There's no EU traceability, and the feedstock availability is also a question because if you have 40 BCM as a whole, it doesn't mean you have 40 BCM of the most virtuous waste and residues. But strong drivers, and most of which is that, and that's quite an important feature compared to other green commodities, is that there's an existing infrastructure. Once you have biomethane, it's exactly like methane. You can use the gas grid. It goes into conventional engines, and you can do any use which you had with conventional gas, you can have with biomethane. It's rather cost competitive compared to other decarbonization means. It's easier to do biomethane than to have green hydrogen, for instance. It can be used in various schemes, and you can also reach areas aside from the gas grid because it can be very, very local. If you do not transform your biogas into biomethane, you can still have a very local, virtuous economic scheme. And you can also deal in long-term offtake, which is good from an industrial point of view because you can directly do upstream deals, which will secure biomethane output for the next 10 to 15 years. So what next, aside from those drivers? Well, the ETS2 will be achieved through incorporation of certified biomethane in gas portfolio. So that can be quite a game changer, aside from all the blending obligations which are kicking in. So that's also a very strong point. Typically in France, by next year, any fossil gas distributor will have the obligation to incorporate unsubsidized biomethane in the mix sold to end customers, which will be an obvious demand kick for unsubsidized material. It's the same in the Netherlands, and it's going to be more and more of a logic. Companies are switching from, but we may get to that later, maybe in the questions, because I think it's quite the rage now. And the Annex 9A, of course, is also something which will increase. So that will be good for strong, low CI material. But we're running out of time, and I apologize for that. So I'll give the mic back to Julien and see what questions you may have for us. Thanks very much for your time.
Don't worry, Fabien. Don't worry, Fabien. We are on time. Thanks for your presentation. Yeah. One key question for me regarding the biomethane market is that as you mentioned, and the production costs of biomethane are much above the gray gas market at the moment. So what about the competitiveness of biomethane in an subsidized world in the coming years? What could happen to drive demand and keep the momentum?
Yeah, it's a big question indeed, and that's why I was happy to spare it for now. Well, as we discussed, it's unsubsidized demand is difficult to grasp, because obviously it's we're talking about something very expensive compared to gray gas now. But if from a larger perspective, it's not the balance points of fossil gas, but that's we've all seen it going way above 100 euro per megawatt hour. So it doesn't mean that it will be forever at 30 euro per megawatt hour, the world being quite unstable. Currently speaking, unsubsidized biomethane is of course more expensive than that, but at least the cost is known and it's monitored. You won't have worse surprises than that. So on a longer term, it's not that absurd to keep investing in that, because at least your price is capped somewhat. And even still, it's true that in current market conditions, it's very hard to have an economic scheme, reason to buy unsubsidized biomethane. But as for many green products, we all know that it's cheaper to burn coal and petrol than to do all the schemes. So it's obviously going to be more expensive, at least in the beginning, while we develop the economies of scale. So that's the role of a regulator, to push demand, either by subsidies, which is the case now, but more and more, this subsidized world will give relay to blending obligation, in the way that, aside from different states will less and less spend public money to artificially fund upstream biomethane, they will transfer responsibility to the whole economic system of the energy distribution, because by a blending obligation, you compel energy seller to add unsubsidized biomethane, so they won't have a choice actually, and there will be a pass-through in global energy prices, because there's no way you can actually build up those schemes without having, at least in the beginning, while we work out on the industrial possibilities to make them cheaper, there's no way there won't be an extra cost. So for now, it's fiscally driven, because it's state money for subsidization, and tomorrow it will be blending obligation. And as for the fuel EU, as for the ETS, etc., they're strongly ramping up, typically in France.
Okay, thank you, Fabien. So we still have 1 minute to take a question in the chat, but I will just launch the last poll of this presentation. It's just the satisfaction survey. So can you just please take a few seconds to fill this satisfaction survey? It's still very useful for us to have your feedback. So just coming back to the chat, I don't see any. Yeah, I don't see, no more questions. So thanks for your attention. Thanks for your interaction with us today. You will find, as mentioned, on the replay and the slides in our ENGIE platform. Just be informed that we'll organize a webinar session in July, on the 16th of July, with a global energy market outlook. So it's now time to close the session. Thanks a lot to Fabien and Quentin, and see you soon on ENGIE Scan. Goodbye.
Thank you for your attention. Have a very nice day.
Thank you. Bye bye.